Good afternoon, and welcome to Affecting Change from Mid-Level. I am Vanessa Bowling Adjavon, the Director of Administration and Human Resources at HACER. In today's session, you'll learn how to bring a stakeholder mindset to your role as a mid-level manager to solve problems and capture opportunities. Although mid-level employees don't always see the totality of their contributions, using an owner's mindset helps achieve company goals. Before we get started, I'd like to recognize our session sponsors, PayPal and Salesforce. I'd first like to thank PayPal for their support of HACER and diversity, equity, and inclusion within the Hispanic community. To give remarks on behalf of Salesforce, I'd like to introduce Salesforce's Senior Vice President, Employee Relations and Equality, Lori Castillo Martinez. Welcome, Lori.
Thank you for having me. Thank you to Sarah for inviting me to join this important conversation. It's really an honor to be here with you today and to be a part of today's discussion, Affecting Change from the Mid-Level. At Salesforce, we are very committed to creating an environment where a Latinx community can have career success and really thrive. Many of us, including myself, have had that experience of being the first or only in the room. And at the same time, speaking for myself, I've also had incredible sponsors and mentors, managers who have supported my career. This is really what drives me to use my voice and platform to create that access, change those experiences, and design systems for those who historically haven't been in the room. All of you on this call today have an opportunity to provide that for each other and to those who are part of your teams. At Salesforce, we're dedicated to driving racial equality and justice both inside and outside the workplace. It really takes us all going together to make the change happen. We're so encouraged by the progress we're seeing in increasing representation of underrepresented communities, but we're all here because there's still so much work to do in the space. But because we understand that when we create access and inclusion for our communities, we're directly impacting our innovation and really changing the world around us. Representation matters, sponsorship matters, inclusion matters. Let's work together to make this a reality. Feel so privileged to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
We are missing. We are missing from so many rooms, classrooms, boardrooms, everything in between. But we are here. We are programmers and coders, animators and analysts, engineers and entrepreneurs, designers, builders, creators, the bringers of change. We are here. We are here leading. We are here innovating. We are here working for our vision of better companies, communities, and countries. We are here. We have always been here. Our stories, our voices, our ideas have always mattered, more than mattered. And we won't stop asking more of the spaces that need to make space for more like us. All of us, all different types of us.
Thank both PayPal and Salesforce for your dedication to Hispanic inclusion and your continued support of HACER. I'd now like to introduce you to today's moderator, Janine Ting Jensen, Senior Director, Inclusion and Diversity, North America at Teva Pharmaceuticals. Welcome, Janine.
Thank you, Vanessa, and thank you for having me. I'm here to bring you the important conversation next that we're having on affecting change from the mid-level. I will be joined by two other wonderful individuals and leaders in this space, Jose Espaillat from Wells Fargo Advisors and Lori Castillo Martinez from Salesforce. They are going to be joining us to have this conversation on how all of us have an opportunity to affect change when we find ourselves in the mid-level. How do we create opportunity to create greater accessibility, share back, and how do we navigate to move forward? We are here to share some of the strategies and tips that we've encountered and how we can continue to move this forward together. I'm going to welcome my two panelists to join us on the screen and really introduce them and ask them just to say a few words about themselves as we get started. So Jose, if you could start.
I am going to pass on in true Latino chivalry and say lady first.
Oh, fabulous to meet everybody and feel so privileged to be here and have this conversation.
Here, super excited to be here. I am a big fan of Ased, even a bigger fan of Sid. So excited for the opportunity to share some insight with the audience.
Thank you both. And so let's really jump in, right? We want to get to the pieces of advice and the thoughts and where we're challenged as a group, and really how do we confront this moment of where we go from here. So Jose, I'm going to go back to you, but how would you describe an owner's mindset when thinking about project management and team leadership, right? In the roles that you had enjoyed and what you see in the workplace?
Absolutely. And I have to say by way of background, I was, for most of my career, I've been a financial advisor where in essence, I was a small business owner where I had to take care of everything from A to Z. And for the last 4 years, kind of moving into corporate America, very different in the way that would look at that. But, I felt like I've carried in that owner mindset, since transitioning here into corporate America. And kind of what I mean, but what I feel that the owner mindset is really taking responsibility for the outcome of the project. Making sure that you feel like, the impact that you do, the work that you do, really truly impacted what that outcome is going to be. Not just what those outputs are, not just those day-to-day tactics to make sure that the project is done, kind of making sure if somebody sends me an email and they need some type of task completed and I pass that along and I wipe my hand and say, hey, I'm done with that. That's really not that owner mindset. That owner mindset is if I do get that email from a colleague about a task, or is understanding how that impacts the output of that project, and making sure that whatever output you do for that specific project or that specific task is one that, again, is really taking responsibility for that outcome, what it's going to do. And, but to do that, you also have to cultivate an ownership mindset in your team. Focus on transparency, autonomy, customer empathy. It's not something that can be done just by yourself. It really got to come from whoever my direct report is, or the manager and the leader as well, because there's times that a leader may be somebody who's perhaps a micromanager, wants to have their hands in every aspect of the conversation, every aspect of the project, and doesn't give you the ability to go out and innovate and do different things. I'll share with you personally my story, again, coming in as a financial advisor, kind of being on my own for most of my career, and coming into corporate America. I still remember the time, and I think that my previous manager still, it's on the call here, where he told me no for the first time. And I was like, no, what does no mean? And really had a lot of conflicts early on, if I got to be honest with you, because I feel like I brought that owner mindset that I wanted to do so much more. But him understanding that, I was fairly new to corporate America, not understanding all of the processes and the nuance that goes into it. So what he did was kind of ease me into it, to where today, I feel like I truly have the autonomy of the ability to really take responsibility and impact on the outcome of what we're doing. So again, a lot there, but from an owner mindset, ultimately is looking at that specific project, that specific task, and saying, you know what, I'm going to do everything in my power to impact that outcome.
Thanks, Jose. If I can, when I hear what you just said, I think of pride in your work, in your product, and that translates to that owner mindset, and that it's priceless, right? Because it's going to follow you throughout your career, no matter where you are in the organization or what company you go to, you carry that through. And I think there's a piece of that we all have pride in our work and being tall about it, right? That's something that will follow us through. Lori, I see you have something to say, so please jump in.
Sure, sure. So I think for me, also sometimes having an owner's mindset might mean knowing when to let go of a project. We all have things that we're really great at, and we all have things that maybe take collaboration to get done or are going to take our collective minds to move forward. And so I also think owner's mindset can sometimes mean knowing when to let go, knowing when to ask for help, and knowing when you really need that collective voice to really have that best outcome, and to innovate where you're trying to make progress.
Thanks, Lori. And when if I reflect upon that for a moment, I think of the stakeholder engagement, right? And you're trying to see who's going to be in your corner to carry something through. And those handoffs, right? We have to build that trust in those relationships so that we can be successful together and as leaders. So recognizing when it's time to hand off, when to release that's so key to all of our success in this mindset. So Lori, if I can stay with you and just ask you, when I say to you, if you think about this, right, mid-level managers, right, are the key to corporate innovation, right? When we unleash them, we open that up. What comes to mind, and what is the role of mid-level managers in driving change?
Sure. So I think, for me, when I think about this, true innovation is driven by people, their ideas. And mid-level managers and mid-level management have really a unique opportunity to drive that corporate innovation. You are closest to the work. You are closest to the facts. You are closest to the skills of your people. You have access to those folks with the best ideas. And so really being those eyes and ears for the company that really understand what needs to get to those C-suite executives. How do you remove barriers? How do you make sure you're providing that support for your teams is really, really important. In many ways, you're a bridge. You're a bridge to really figuring out how do you get this great idea? How do you get this innovation to the right levels to make the right decisions? And I think as mid-level managers, often we can be so busy, or you're running at the speed of your business, or and things can get complex, or in bigger companies, you can sometimes feel like you're in the midst of the bureaucracy. And so it's really important to make sure you are paying that keen attention to your teams, to their ideas, taking that time to really understand, okay, how might this idea further those corporate strategies? How does it move forward? How do you create that connection between what's happening at the top of the organization all the way down? And then also, how do you make sure that you're really listening to your employees, listening to the various voices that are out there with those creative ideas, so you can start to really innovate and push that up so that you can dedicate that time and resources to amplify some of those ideas and making sure that your employees have those opportunities. I think this is how we really get to that point where more people feel seen and heard. I think for me, sometimes when you're in the thick of that mid-level management, you feel like, what can I control? There's not a lot I can control. For me, I actually think it's one of the most powerful parts of a company and of a business, because you have access to both sides, both what the senior leaders are thinking and to what's driving and motivating your employees. And it can be a really powerful place to drive motivation and really drive the culture of the company.
Thanks, Lori. That active listening part, it's something that, right, it never gets old. And you may say to yourself, oh, I'm listening, I'm so active. But then take your notes later, right? Think about the actions of the day and truly what influence your decision making, and challenge yourself, right, on that active listening part. Jose, if I could go to the next question with you, right? It's, how do you know when a manager views themselves as a stakeholder of the project strategy goal? What are the behaviors and results that you view as indicators of that, going back to that ownership mindset, right? What are those behaviors that we're looking at?
So I feel like the behavior that you want to see is when they're really taking that initiative of on a project, when they're speaking up about ideas. When really you don't have to manage them or check in to see how things are going, how the project is doing. They're taking, again, that ownership mentality that we're talking about. And Lori was talking about the culture that you create, and that's such an important aspect around this topic, around taking ownership, about innovation, about seeing yourself as a stakeholder around things, because the space or the place of a mid-level manager it's so unique. It's so important. Again, Lori mentioned, you have access to senior leaders, and then you have access to folks kind of that are working with you, where really the work really happens. So the impact that you can have in that, and the culture that you ultimately are creating with, again, direct reports to you and kind of upstream with your leader, that truly makes an impact of doing that. And again, that culture is around that trust factor, that ability to know that person, he's gonna, if I assign a task to them, that's gonna get taken care of. I'm not gonna worry about it, because what that's gonna do is, instead of me just saying, okay, let me just complete this task and move on to the next one. Again, I'm having that outcome mentality in place, where that's where innovation happens. That's where, I'm thinking of something that perhaps the senior leaders didn't think about. But more importantly, again, if you don't have that culture, I may just keep that to myself, or it may not be reflected the way that you had pictured it in your mind. So, the second aspect of being a stakeholder is your ability to speak up. And I got to share, this is a Hispanic Latino audience that we're talking about. And sometimes that can be very difficult culturally, where typically we've been taught to keep your head down, do your work, and just kind of move forward. And again, that really doesn't help with outcome, with innovation, with that owner mentality that we have. And so you got to have the ability to speak up and moving forward with that. But at the same time, as a mid-level manager, I have to be able to provide that place for somebody who may be reporting to me, that they feel comfortable, they feel confident enough to bring up ideas to me and move forward, and knowing that I'm going to be listening again, and I'm going to be intentfully listening and understanding and providing feedback and coaching and results, to really helping them grow and move forward with that. So, again, to have, I think the big thing is to see yourself as a stakeholder of a project is that initiative on that project, and that thinking about that outcome that you're talking about.
So I thank you. What I'm hearing, right, it's another key value for us, that trust factor, how we establish the culture amongst our teams and those rolling up to us. That really can open up the ability to be innovative and have this mindset, this owner mindset. So thank you for that tip. Another really good gem. We have a live question coming on that Lori is going to take first. But what tips do you have, Lori, for best practices when offering a new idea approach to a project, right? In other words, how can I spotlight creative ideas of my team to my supervisor, right? Elevate.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. We've been talking about the opportunities of mid-level managers. I also just want to acknowledge it's a hard place to be. You are both again, sandwiched between those two levels. And so, I think my advice would be is really understand what's important at those senior levels. What are those goals? What are those strategies you're trying to achieve? Be able to look around the corner, so that as you're hearing those ideas, you know what you're looking for in terms of what's important to where you're going. I also think the other thing is really understanding who those key stakeholders are at that next level above you, and maybe even one level above that. Who are those influencers? Where is it you need to go to get that budget? Who are the people that are going to drive the agenda for the organization? And as you get to know those organizational structures, it will better prepare you as a mid-level manager to figure out, when that idea comes in, what are the best forums to amplify it? Who are the best people who can sponsor and support your ideas or your team's ideas? How do you think about reward and recognition for your team that's raising those ideas? And so I think you're in that really pivotal role. And so thinking ahead, in a previous role, I used to make lists for the quarter of who are all of the influencers I needed to work with in the upcoming quarter to help me drive mine and my team's results. Who are going to be those critical players that needed to buy in? Who are going to be those critical folks that the skills and competencies I needed to move forward? And so I think it's really important to really think ahead, know your organization, and know how to navigate your organization so that you can be that one for your team that's removing barriers, amplifying their ideas, and getting the investments you need to find your team success together.
Lori, I think that those are some great tips. And what you're talking about I sometimes call it your personal board of directors, right? And with that comes this need to clarify where you're going personally and where your team's going. And when we take that time to slow down and think of those goals, objectives for your group, suddenly this opens it up even more, right? When we're thinking about all of these ways we can interact. I'm just going to see if Jose, do you have any additional tips on how to pitch these new ideas and approaches to the project?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and I think I keep coming back to that word culture because I feel that is so important to ultimately have that culture. But as a mid-level manager, or actually as any type of manager, the way that I feel personally, my most important job, or the most rewarding part of my job, is elevating my the folks that work with me, that works for my direct reports. I want to see them grow, and that's one of the hard things of corporate America, that if you groom somebody, you work with somebody, you coach, you develop them, you become very good friends, and then you do all of that for the ultimate goal that they're being able to move on to a different place, a different area, and kind of grow within their careers. So the question around, how do I spotlight, or how do I spotlight ideas when bringing it to senior leaders? That I love when those situations happen, because I feel that's a great coaching opportunity where, again, depending on the culture that you have, I would love the ability to be able to have that individual contributor really be the one that is delivering that message, that's delivering that idea that they're doing. But it's not just putting them on the spot and say, hey, go out here and talk to the senior leader. It's coaching them through them, having conversations through them, so they can be successful in building those relationships. So again, that coaching component or opportunity that you have whenever you have somebody that's bringing innovation, how to share that with senior leaders. I honestly feel the best way to do that is kind of hear from that person himself where the idea came from.
Those are such great tips, right? How to spotlight on the team and to give that ownership mindset back. So thank you for sharing. We have a lot of questions coming in, and some of them are so relevant to the tips. And one of them is, if either of you can chime in on this, is how do we navigate in the hybrid reality, right? How do we navigate all this coaching together during this hybrid time? We have some people working, some in the office, some at home, or some completely remotely, and suddenly all these strategies, right? We have to adapt. So do you have any tips for how you've been successful recently in our hybrid times?
Sure, I can take that one. So if hopefully you can hear me. So I would say the first thing to do is to listen, to talk to your employees and understand what they need. What I think one of my biggest learning in this hybrid environment is there isn't a one size fits all. Some people really love it. Some people are itching to get back to the office. And so I think the really important thing, we've been talking a lot about your important role as a mid-level manager, but I think it's also important from an inclusion perspective to make sure you're having those meaningful conversations with your employees. Understand what they need to feel included. Understand the visibility your manager might need to see so you can help that person be seen in the workplace. And balancing it, right? Being really cognizant of all of the different things that people are contending with right now. There is so much going on. And so really building that trusted relationship, really listening to your employees and asking those questions, taking a minute as we're all in back-to-back calls and videos to just say, how are you doing? What's going on? How can I best support you? Are you feeling included? Are there things you need that I can better support you? Are you frustrated because you can't get a word edgewise into your conference call? And so I think it's really important to just have some of those important conversations in both directions, both with your leaders. What do they need to see from your team? What are their expectations? And then also for your teams, what do they need to feel heard and seen? And how do you help amplify their voices? I think a lot of it is we're still learning as we go, and really getting into the root of what's going to help your team and your individuals on your team be successful is going to go a long way.
Thank you, Lori. Such relevant advice as we step forward and look at how we lead, right? Look how we lead in this space. Jose, do you have more to add on the hybrid opportunities that we have?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is such call it a hot topic right now, because to your point, some people are working in the office, some are still from home. What are we going to do? We're transitioning back. and if I can think back to the good old days, as I would call it, where, I feel like we had a phenomenal culture of Wells Fargo advisors. And, we used to joke around that we're huggers. We like giving hugs. And to your point, Laura, just asking, how are you doing? And truly having those personal conversations. And I feel like at the beginning of this pandemic, of having to work from home and transitioning to all of that, a lot of that kind of continue to move forward to that virtual environment, to where, a lot of the recommendations and the suggestions that was being made was connect more with your advisors, listen with advisors. Sorry, I work with advisors. Connect more with your employees, with your colleagues around the organization. Make sure you understand what is going on, being compassionate around what is happening in their lives, because this is very different to everyone. Again, if we go back to that ownership mentality that we talked about, it's not a matter of being online from 9 to 5. Honestly, it doesn't matter when you're online, as long as the work gets done. And again, that's having that trust, that culture, that ownership mentality that the work is going to happen. Now, today, it is definitely, like I said, we're in a different situation, because, I was talking to somebody, we're almost 2 years into this working from home environment, and I feel like, okay, there's only so much you can check in and so much you can do, the virtual happy hours, the virtual events and different things like that. So, but now some more people are working from home. What are we doing? But we just got to be compassionate. We got to be intentional when talking to our, to our colleagues, to our peers that we're working on, and understand that, the feelings that you're feeling, they're probably going through very similar things of what they're doing. So just kind of, again, being authentic, being compassionate, and listening to them is really what's important. Continuing to move forward as we push through this, which hopefully we'll get back to normal as soon as possible, whatever that normal is.
Right, and this new normal. So when we think about how we work together, right, in the hybrid environment, another question that we have, right, is what resources or skills, like what are the top pieces you go to develop your team, and what would be those to share back that you've seen great success with when it comes to skills to help managers innovate within your function and collaborate? Lori, maybe want to go next?
Sure, happy to do so. So I think it's again understanding your business. And so how do you start to flag what those important things are for your team to know, for your team to understand, and how do you start preparing them for the future? I think it is really, really important. Being able to quickly pivot, quickly understand what's happening and how to look around those corners. I think we all are living in a world where agility is really important, that ability to actively listen, and the ability to drive change. I'm not sure we're going to go back to where we've been. I think we're in a new normal. And so I think building those skills, as Jose talked about, around compassion, listening, understanding, I think those are going to be the things that really take us forward. And that resiliency and that ability to move with where things are going is something we all have to get better at. It's something that looks a little different in a hybrid world. And I also just want to acknowledge, for some people, the hybrid world is amazing. Being able to work from home, being able to have balance, and being able to flex your schedule is actually really amazing. I think we're moving to a space where we can be successful from anywhere we are, and acknowledging that and really taking advantage of that. And as a mid-level manager, you have that opportunity to create that environment where your employee can be successful, whether that equals being in the office because they have a role that's more suited to the office, or it may be a role that is more suited to online, which allows them to be more productive, to balance what they have going on in their lives, or just to get that respite and mental health support that they need. So I think it's important, just from a resource perspective, that this is where you open your mind and, again, leverage your resources, the benefits in your company, your leaders. This is also a great place to engage your employee resource groups. I know we talk a lot with our equality groups about what are the unique circumstances and things that different communities need. The resources are not a one size fits all. Again, I think there's different communities have different needs. And I think depending on where you are in the organization, it's going to be different. And so I think understanding, as a mid-level manager, if you don't know what your resources are, how do you carve out that time to go find them and get the support you need to support your teams?
Thank you so much, Lori. I feel that all of us are going to walk away with, like, how do we build that trust and keep those stakeholders up? Jose, do you have anything to add on resources that have proven to be invaluable to you, and how you transfer those skills?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think Laura, there at the end, kind of hit the nail on the head of, first you have to know where those resources are, what those resources are. You know, I work with an organization that we have over 250,000 employees worldwide. So the resources that we have is immenseful, you know, that they're all over the place. So the first thing you have to do is understand what those resources are, so that you're able to share that with your team, with your peers, with your colleagues, of kind of what resources they can do to kind of help in their management skills. But honestly, I think it's just that personal touch, you know, understanding what to do, and really building that quote unquote trust that we're just talking about, and kind of giving folks more of that, if I want to call the leash for that owner mentality. And again, if I go back to my initial story coming into corporate America with my manager, that, you know, he had a tight leash on me early on. And I think looking back, those for great reasons. I thank him all the time for allowing him to do that. But, you know, after every quarter, every one-on-one, you know, every year, you know, I was able to do more and more, to where now, you know, I have the ability to innovate. You know, we just established a huge project that I led from A to Z, that I know 3 years ago, I wanted to do it 3 years ago, but there's no way I would have been successful, because of the awareness and the knowledge, and kind of leverage the different resources that we are. Where today, you know, kind of as a good manager. And one thing we haven't talked about is, you know, having your lead as a mid-level manager, you can learn so much from your managers, their managers, and so forth, and kind of being able to emulate some of the things that they're doing with your team. That's so important. I feel like something that I've been able to take advantage, and been very blessed to have some great leaders that's kind of helped me with the coaching and the development aspect of things. So a couple of things there on kind of resources of what you can do, kind of tactics that you can do kind of when working with your teams.
Thank you so much. So taking some questions from the audience and going to a piece that can be particularly challenging, we all have to, from time to time, navigate difficult conversations, right? Sometimes we have a sense that someone has ulterior motives. They don't have that good intent we're trained to look for, right? There's conflicting metrics being presented, and we have to call people on it, right? And you may not have support from upper management, right? So when we think about these difficult conversations that we need to have in the workplace and how we navigate, right? What are tips that has worked for you in this space? And maybe I could start with Lori.
Sure. So I think, you know, one of the important things is, especially if these are longstanding relationships or where the conflict has been building, it can sometimes be really hard to see the facts from the people presenting them. And so my first advice I usually give to people is focus on the facts, not on the people. What's really going on from a business perspective? What might be driving somebody and their behavior? And, you know, what's your role in it? And what's really creating that conflict, and really trying to take that step back and really think about it from a pragmatic perspective of, you know, what problem are they trying to solve that they're driving this different types of behavior? So I usually start there, focus on the facts, not on the people. But sometimes it comes down to the people. And I would say, you know, for me, I am a big believer in candid conversations. If you don't know, you can't fix it. And my teams are probably laughing because I say that, you know, 10 times a day. And so often in these conversations, there may be something that has nothing to do with you that's driving the behavior. And it's not until you have that open conversation that you can start to get down to the bottom of these conversations. Now, sometimes those go well and you can navigate them yourselves. Sometimes they don't. And so it's really important to know where you are, have that conversation, but also know that sometimes you might need help. You might need help from your HR business partner. You might need help from your leader. There may be actually things in your system. Someone mentioned conflicting metrics. There may be something in your system that is creating that conflict between two teams. And so really spending that time working with your managers, working with your sponsors, working with those in that situation can sometimes untangle those messy situations. But again, my best advice is don't jump in hot with emotion. Take that step back, and really think about, pragmatically what problem you're trying to solve and how do you really move the business forward. I think can go a really long way in those difficult conversations.
Thanks, Lori. I like that how you described it as remove the emotion, right? I think of taking a walk, revisit those facts, right? Suddenly it becomes much more clearer in your path forward. So very good advice. Focus on the facts. Jose, anything to add on difficult conversations? We've all had to do this, right?
Yeah, and I've had my share of them. But what I will say is you have to understand too, kind of the way that I look at it. I feel like sometimes I spend more time with my team than I do with my family. So conflict is going to happen. Whether you like it or not, it's going to happen. And honestly, here we go. That word again. The culture that you've established among your team can really have a tremendous impact on what the outcome could potentially be of that conflict, of that conversation. But Laura, you kind of said it at the end, because the very first thing that I do is, depending on when the conflict is, if it's something that's been boiling, that's been stewing, and there's something that I know that I have to bring an approach to the team member, that's a different conversation than if something that happens in the moment. Because to your point, that's happened to me in a couple of situations, and the thing that the best thing that I did was acknowledge that I was getting frustrated, I was getting upset, and I had to take a break, so I respectfully say, you know what, let's revisit this. Give me 20 minutes, an hour a day, however long we need. But right now we have too many emotions flowing. Let's take a break and we can come back and revisit this, and then we can have that conversation focusing on the fact. And, I love the candid topic. That's something that, Charlie Scharf, our new CEO, kind of brought in as one of the expectations of the company, is to be candid, have those candid conversations when we do it. And, especially whenever we're having difficult conversations, we can't sugarcoat it. We can't kind of beat around the bush. You have to go straight, stick to the facts, and just kind of move on with the process. It's something that needs to happen. So yeah.
Thanks, Ode. Have the candid conversation.
Yes,
stick to the facts. This is great.
Yeah.
Everyone remember facts. So if I could go to our next piece of this, another theme, right? I think of sometimes in the community, we're humble, we work hard, right? And we have difficulty, right, speaking up and being advocates for ourselves. So what advice, Jose, do you have on the importance of self-advocacy, right? How can the mid-level managers push themselves to communicate upward, right? When we think of our execs, right? And how we can demonstrate that commitment and contributions, right? And especially when we have a manager we're rolling up to, we have a team behind us, right? But there's the self-advocacy part is something we all have an opportunity to do better on.
No, yeah, and I think right there you hit the nail on the head there at the end, is that we all have an opportunity to be better. And I made a comment earlier that, as Latinos, a lot of time we don't like to boast about things that we've about our success. Again, just kind of keeping your head down and doing the job, doing the work, and moving forward and expecting great things. And we all know that in corporate America, unfortunately, that's not how it works. You have to be able to go out and elevate your work and talk about your work, because if you don't, nobody else will. Ideally, like I said, as a leader, one of my biggest goals and one of my biggest things is to really elevate folks that I work with and move them up to go. They can go to the next level, to the coaching and expectation, things like that, and advocating for themselves is one of those biggest things. And it's really calling that out. And I'm going to throw out a new term kind of to the conversation today, and that's around the imposter syndrome. Kind of saying, well, I don't want to speak up because I don't feel like I did that great of a job. They're just saying that I did a good job, and that's not the case. So the very first thing that I know that I've had to do, and I try to overcome, the imposter syndrome every day, is really recognizing it, understanding it, and pushing through that. But also the next part is building a network around you, of close friends and colleagues, mentors and sponsors that will call you out, that will say you have to go out and elevate and talk to those leaders and promote yourself. Because again, if you don't, nobody else will.
If you don't, no one else will. Those are our words, right?
Yes.
If you don't speak up and you don't speak that truth, no one else will. And that's great. Those are great words. Lori, anything to add on this one? And then we're going to take a Q&A here.
Sure. So I think for me, it's so important to really understand what is creating that lack of confidence or that barrier. And I love what Jose just said about the network. You need to surround yourself. Some people call them your own personal board of directors, or those people that are going to pump you up when you're down, or those people that are going to help build confidence in your ideas, so that when you do go forward or you do step into maybe that uncomfortable space, you feel good about it. You know your stuff, you've made your plan, you've pulled it together, and you're ready to have those conversations. I think the other thing that's also really important is around access. A lot of times you might feel like you don't have access to the right people, or your team doesn't have access to the right leaders to hear the ideas. And I think one of the important things as a mid-level manager is you have the opportunity to create access for your teams. And so I think as Jose said earlier, right? If you don't do it, who is? But at the same time, as a mid-level leader, remember you have the keys. You have that ability to open those doors for your team who may not be speaking up for themselves. So if you can't do it for yourself, do it for your teams. Make sure you're spending that time, really understand, and making sure that you're connected to those right sponsors, that your team has sponsors, not just mentors, or not even just that personal board of directors, but who are those people that are one level up or two level up that are going to really drive and help support that person's career. You've really got to be that advocate. And again, sometimes it's not what you can do for yourself, but what you're doing for your team that actually ends up being self-advocating. So anyways, I think it's a really interesting topic, and one that as mid-level managers, there's so much opportunity to create access and really support folks.
So as mid-level managers, really embracing that opportunity that you can get those keys and open up that access, and taking that courage, because it's for yourself and your team, but that taking that leap, that can be a really tough spot. So push forward on that risk. We have so many people here to support you. So we're going to take another question live from the floor here, but it's a really one of area of opportunity that I'm really passionate about, right? It's how do we translate global enterprise-wise DEI goals and metrics, right, in the mid-level, right? So when you think about how we're diversifying the pipeline, I think of this question as it's an opportunity for us, but we're navigating the barriers and creating the access at the same time. So trying to tackle the DEI goals while also navigating can be very difficult. Do you have advice on translating this, right, to your roles and people in the roles at the mid-level?
And I'll start with that one, and not necessarily from the role that I have as a mid-level manager, but to really begin to make an impact around DE&I initiatives is really having to insert those into ultimately performance reviews. I feel like in the past, the DE&I strategy has been a nice to have. It's like, oh, that's good. Oh, we're doing this. Let's kind of pat each other in the back. We're doing a great job. We're bringing diversity into the organization, but it's excluding the inclusion aspect of it to do that. So one thing that we began to try to working here at Wells Fargo is really beginning to make an impact and making that part of your performance review. What activity, what impact that you as a manager, as an individual contributor, for everyone in the organization is really having around pushing or moving our DE&I strategy forward and moving that. Because if you don't do that, again, it's a nice to have. We mentioned that that I think it was Janine, that you have a passion for it. I mean, everybody here probably has a passion for D&I. So we insert that into a work, but there's a lot of other people that may not be as passionate as I do. And unless you put it as part of the performance review, and even to add it an extra layer forward, if you have kind of a business aspect of your role, kind of when I work with advisors and leaders, is, what impact are they having? If they're having a big impact, that can impact your compensation through bonuses and things like that. That's whenever you're really going to be to see change around kind of implementing DE&I enterprise strategies around organizations.
Thank you, Jose. Lori, anything to add? Translating those DEI goals, right? We all find ourselves here because it's so important to us.
Yeah, I think for me, I love this question to this group, because this is I think for me, mid-level managers have the most power to actually change the DE&I landscape for a company. Every decision you make, every way that you engage with your team is a decision to include somebody or not. Every hiring decision you make, every opportunity you provide on those great projects is an opportunity for inclusion or an opportunity for career opportunity and navigation. And so I think it's important not to think about this topic in terms of, what are the big things the company is doing? Every manager on this call has a role to play, and every decision you make is a decision for this topic and in support of inclusion. And so I would just say, again, from a very pragmatic perspective, sometimes our systems are not always set up to make this easy, but you as a manager always have the power of who you're hiring, who you're not, who you're giving projects to, and who you're promoting to make a difference in this space. So just really excited. Don't feel paralyzed by it. Really just go for it and think about it in every decision you make.
So what I'm hearing is role modeling, right? It's role modeling that behavior that you want to see in your peers, right? In the leaders, and being proud of it, right? Because you have that opportunity to advocate and to think differently when we translate that action for the goals. Thanks, Lori. So I have one more question. Just maybe if each of you want to just chime in on it, but we have someone who recent empty nester, 15-year middle manager, and she wants to focus and reinvent, right, on how she can speak up for herself more. How will her new self-advocacy be received? Any advice on how to get that started?
I'll take that one as well. And I think, Laura, you touched on this earlier, and that's through employee resource groups. I'm a huge fan of employee resource groups, and as an empty nester, maybe having some more time to get involved in the different things. And if you're a part of this group and this organization, that means that you're probably an ally to all diversity dimensions out there. So if you want to learn more about the Asian community, the Native American community, we have employee resource groups around all of those. And by not just joining those employee resource group, what I mean as far as talking up to yourself is joining leadership teams of those organizations to really make an impact and really begin to hone skills on advocating for yourself, on speaking, on leadership. There's so many great things that you can do and you can learn as a part of an employee resource network that, at the end of the day, yes, it's going to have an impact of the success of that specific group, but it's not going to have a kind of a linear impact to whatever your roles and responsibilities are, what your job is. So it's a great way to really learn kind of some of those skills through the employee resource group. So that would be my suggestion is, not just join your Latino employee resource group, it's kind of be an ally, join others, but join leadership teams. And that's where a lot of those tasks and skills can definitely grow from.
So ERGs and allyship. Thank you. Lori, any quick comment here?
Sure. I would just say, one of the best pieces of career advice I've ever gotten was around, careers are long. And there are times when we have the time and space to really lean in and push forward. And there's other times when it's okay for us to refocus and repivot. And so I think, it sounds like you're ready to lean back in. And I think, again, providing that context to your manager. So having the conversation about where you want to go, really thinking about your development plan. What are those goals? What are you trying to achieve? What do you think are those resources you're going to need from your manager would be? And really being thoughtful about that development plan. Where do you need to increase some skills, and where are you open to learn and have that beginner's mindset to lean in differently? I think having that context and doing your homework going into that conversation will go a long way.
Thank you. So it's never too late. You can always refocus, lean back in, and just be brave. Have that conversation. Get it started. Development plan, that's such a great tool to use, and you don't need to wait for your manager to ask for it. Mm-hmm. So thank you both so much. I got so much from this, just spending time with you, sticking to the facts, right? Not being afraid, standing tall, and being your own best self-advocate at the mid-manager level. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Janine, Jose, and Lori, for your insights and for being with us today. Our next session, Growing Your Career Through Board Service, starts in just a few minutes. I look forward to seeing you all there.